So what I'm planning, my thought is, let's get started on the new stuff, which will incorporate, you'll remember most of the stuff that we did that last day, and we'll get to the 6-8B stuff, and you'll remember the stuff that you need to remember by the time we're done. Is that reasonable? Because I'm assuming that either you didn't do the homework from 6-8A, or you did it the day that we finished, and in which case you don't remember it anyway. Yep.
I just have one question. So when the amplitude, because it's just a number, like not pi?
Correct. Amplitude, oh, you're talking about period.
Sorry, yeah.
When the period becomes a number and not just pi, we're actually going to do a couple that will deal with that.
Okay.
So,
I just didn't know how to graph those.
yeah, that's,
Okay.
just give me a minute. And, should do it again? She did.
What did she do?
She took the remote.
Oh.
Oh, well.
Yes.
Anybody see the remote anywhere? You sold it? Good, I'll take the money at least, since it's my remote. Okay, so we're going to start with this. You like this? It's like heartbeats, doesn't it?
What is that?
How does it
Me
work?
running.
We want to find, as you can kind of see there, find the equation for each graph. So we're going to find the equation for this. So you're going to look at this, and we're going to try to remember, and like I said to you the last day right before break, you'll probably remember more than you expect to. But we'll figure it all out. So when you looked at this, if you had looked at this right, 2 days before break, you would have said, not a chance. But now let's look at it and piece together some of the things that we can come up with. Thoughts?
The sine graph.
It's a sine graph. Why do you say it's a sine graph? Because it starts at 0. It starts right there at the origin, which means that the equation is going to be y equals, and then there's going to be a sign in there somewhere. Fair? Fair. My next question. What is the amplitude? The amplitude is 1. Why do you say that?
Because it goes up to 1.
Because it goes up to 1 and down to -1, which makes the amplitude 1. So I would write a 1 right here, except we don't need to write a 1. Fair?
Yep.
Okay. Next question. Is this a positive sine graph or a negative sine graph?
Positive.
Why is it positive?
Goes up first.
Because it goes up first. If it was negative, it would have gone down first. Okay? All right. Next question. What is the period? Here's the way that I try to find the period. I'll start there, and I'll follow the graph and wait until I get back to that same spot. So in other words, wait until I get back to 0. So we go up, we come down, we're at 0. Have we gone through an entire cycle?
No,
Why not?
because we haven't gone down yet.
We haven't gone down yet. So we'll go down, we'll come up, we're back at 0. Have we gone through an entire cycle now?
Yes.
Yes. Therefore, from 0 to 2, how far is that?
2.
2. And so therefore the period is 2. Okay with that? Now, this is where many mistakes are made. Okay? Sirens go off and all that, right? Okay. People want to take that 2 and put it right up here. But the period is not the number that goes there. The period, the formula for period is
2 pi over b.
2 pi over b. We are trying to find b. So therefore, the period has to equal 2 pi over b, and we're now solving an algebra problem. Multiply the b. Right, divide the 2. b equals
Pi.
pi, which therefore means that pi and then x. The x is always there. That's our answer. So that's the order I would do it. Sine or cosine, amplitude, positive or negative, period to find B. Okay? Remember that the period is not B, but we use the period to find B. Questions there? Not as bad as you thought? 46. Where do we start?
Sine or cosine?
Sine or cosine? Which one?
Cosine.
Why is 46 a cosine?
Starts at 1.
It starts at either a maximum or a minimum. Okay? If it starts at either a maximum or a minimum, it's cosine. If it starts in the middle, it's sine. So this is a cosine graph. So y equals, over here, cosine. What's next? Amplitude. What is the amplitude?
Negative
3. How can you tell? Goes up to 3 and down to negative 3. So the amplitude is 3. And the amplitude goes right there. The amplitude's nice, it's easy. We find the amplitude, we put it in front of the sine or the cosine. What's next? Is it positive or negative? Which one is it?
Negative.
Negative, because cosine should start at its maximum. If it doesn't start at its maximum, but instead starts at its minimum, that's because it's a negative. Fair? So we can tell that sine is negative if it starts in the middle and goes down instead of up. We can tell that cosine is negative if it starts at its bottom rather than at its top. Make sense? Now what?
Period.
Period. What is the period?
5. 4.
Over.
Yeah.
Let's see. We start down here, we go up, we come back down here. At this point, has it gone through an entire cycle?
Yes.
Yes, it has. So we're going from 0 to 4, which makes our period 4. So negative 3 cosine of 4x. Huh?
Solve for the period.
B. This is not the, I forgot, I'm sorry. So what do I write?
4 equals 2 pi over b.
4 equals 2 pi over b.
B.
Or b equals 2 pi. B equals 2 pi over 4, which equals
1/2
pi over 2. So what do I write?
pi over 2.
Pi over 2x. That. What you think? I want to show you one more, because it's a little different. 42. 42 is a little different. You'll see why in a minute. So tell me what you know about 42.
It's a cosine.
Cosine. If you have a question why, yell. Or raise your hand, or whisper, or whatever. Okay with cosine? Okay. Next.
Amplitude.
Amplitude is
2.
2. Well, amplitude comes next. Amplitude is 2. Now, negative because
Starts
it starts at the bottom. Now what?
Period.
Period.
2 pi over 2. So pi over 2.
Is there a problem here with period?
Yeah.
What's the problem? Or, I mean, not that we can't overcome it, but what's the, when you look at it, you say, ooh. When we start here, it never
Goes through a full cycle.
comes back to there, right? So we can't start here and follow it and wait for it to get back down because we don't know when it's going to be. So therefore, we kind of need to expand and adjust our horizons or whatever, if you will. And let's start somewhere that we will see again. Well, if we start here
Oh, Jesus.
and we go down and up and we get to here, have we now completed an entire cycle?
No.
No. And so we need to keep going until we hit it again, but
Don't hit
we
it.
don't. So we can't use that.
Start up there on the very end?
Up at the top, up here?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, we go down, we come up, we get back up to the maximum. Have we gone through an entire cycle?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's how we gotta judge the period here. So, we see where this is. And we see where that is. So where are we here? Negative pi, and where are we here?
Pi.
Positive pi. And how far is it from negative pi to positive pi?
2 pi.
2 pi. And so therefore the period is equal to 2 pi. Sir?
Have we just gone from x-axis to points and multiplied by
How did we get pi?
Because if you kept on going, it'd be negative 4 pi
In
over
this
4.
specific case, yes.
Cancel out.
But if there's any other adjustment in it, like what we're gonna get into in a couple of minutes, there could be like a vertical shift.
Like it's pi.
And if there's a vertical shift, it won't hit the axis at
And the
Oh,
fourth
half,
cancel out.
at the halfway mark. It would be a, maybe a third mark or a fourth mark and stuff like that. So I think you're better off going to, starting at a spot and going to that same spot. Did that make sense? Okay. Period is 2 pi. Therefore, b is 1. Because 2 pi over b equals 2 pi, so b is 1, so therefore, yeah. Well, in this case, just like I was saying to Christian, because there's no strange adjustment, it's halfway. But it's not always going to be that way. Like if we ended up with some type of a shift, it wouldn't be that way. So you got to be a little careful of that. The part where you said it makes sense, cool. But don't rely on that. That's all I'm saying. Okay? How we doing? I like those. I like the ones where you look at graphs and turn them into equations. I don't know why. I do that. Oh, and I don't have a remote. Little things, you know? Yep.
You took my remote.
Wow.
I have to write somewhere and I can't blank this out.
Maturity.
Wow. It hurts.
Can't you like get up?
I can't say how
Calling
much
me
better.
immature.
Want somebody to get on the.
There's no blank up there.
You can't just, like,
There's no button?
power it off.
Well, I don't want to turn it off, because we're going to use it again. So
I see.
I was going to leave the stuff there if I could blank this out, because then I'd write. Oh, well. Okay, so before break, we talked about this equation. That this was kind of the fundamental equation for sine or cosine, correct? Okay. But it's kind of not entirely truthful there, because there's more to it. And the more to it looks like this.
Oh,
Divided by, to the power of, no, that's all.
it looks like factoring.
And this doesn't add a whole heck of a lot. And to be honest, the more basic fundamental problems are going to be just like we were, a sine of bx, and that'll be it. But we do have to prepare for these other things. So let's talk about what they are. First of all, in that equation, what's the amplitude? A. What's the period? Oh, no.
Dx plus C.
Hang on, stop. No. No, we're going to try this again. What's the amplitude? A. What's the period?
2 pi over B.
2 pi over b. Okay? Remember before I was saying, I said this is a mistake that's commonly made? That's also a mistake that's commonly made. B is not the period. Repeat after me. B is not the period. Okay. But that's one of the most frustrating things when I grade the test or quiz or whatever it is that's upcoming, is the number of people that will say that the period is 3. Okay? So make sure that that's not you, okay? All right, amplitude is A, period is 2 pi over B. Then we have something that we call phase shift. And the phase shift is how far it moves from side to side, to the left or to the right. Can you tell me of what I have tossed in there? Which do you think a horizontal shift will have to do with? C. Boy, I'm so glad you understood what I was saying because it didn't sound good at all. Why do you say that C has something to do with horizontal shifts? Because it's inside the parentheses. So this stuff goes back to what we talked about in September, right? It's the same kind of thing. So then what's D going to do?
Vertical
Going
shift.
to move it up and down. Yep. So here's the thing. The phase shift is a little bit different from what you would expect. You would expect it to just basically be C. But the reality is that the phase shift is negative C over B. Okay. Phase shift is negative C over B. And the vertical shift is what you would expect. It is just D. Talk to me about the direction of a phase shift. If it's positive or negative, so if it's positive, which direction is this one going to shift? It's definitely one of those. I heard a right and a left, and I agree that one of those is correct.
It's left.
Left.
Because remember it's opposite.
That is absolutely correct.
What?
Remember that inside the parentheses, the shift horizontally is opposite the direction here. Okay? So let's say that we are taking a look at well, let's do 52. It's over here. Okay? So they want the amplitude, the period, and the phase shift. So in number 52, what is the amplitude? Be careful. Amplitude is always positive. So the amplitude for number 52 is 7. What is the period? Amplitude is 7. Period is 2 pi
Over.
over 4, which becomes pi over 2. I would agree. And then the phase shift.
3 over 4.
Is that a positive 3 over 4 or a negative 3 over 4?
Positive.
Positive, because it's negative C. And C right now is negative 3, so it's negative, negative 3. Okay. Now, you know, looking at this, which direction this goes. Which direction does this go? It goes to the right. And so when we talk about phase shifts, and that's one of the things they say here, including direction, okay, we're going 3/4 of a unit to the right. If phase shift is, after putting it into the formula, negative C over B, if the phase shift is positive, it'll go to the right. If the phase shift is negative, it'll go to the left. That's kind of what this negative does. This negative sign on this takes into account the whole, it goes the opposite way that we think. So if in doubt, go back to this and go, well, I know this is supposed to go to the right. And so it does.
Because if it's, oh, okay, never mind, because it's negative, the
Opposite of it takes into account the fact that it goes the opposite direction than you expect. So if, when you plug it into the formula, the phase shift is positive, it will go to the right. If when you plug it into the formula, the phase shift is negative, it will go to the left. Now, there's a little trick in here too, for something like 54. Actually, I want to show you this first. There we go. So here they talk about a strategy for graphing. And they give you this big, huge set of stuff and step this, step that, and everything else. But what I want you to see is, okay, because they're talking about the same stuff that we're talking about, and we're going to do this in a second. We're going to graph one in a second. But look at this part right here. Here's the original, but they adjusted it to be this. What did they do to this to get this?
Divided by b.
I'm going to use a different word than divided. Not an F word. Factor. Yeah, they factored out the b. Okay? So if we distributed the b, we'd get bx plus c, which is what we started with. So they factored out the b. So here's the nice thing about it. If you see it in this manner right here, the phase shift is simply what's over here. Okay? Basically, the opposite of that. But that b on the outside, so if you see something factored out in front there, then the phase shift is just going to be the opposite of this. So what I mean by that is, when we go here, and we take a look at 51, for instance, 54, for instance, that's what I said, 54. Okay. You see how this is factored out in front here? So therefore, the phase shift on this one is going to be simply 1. 1 unit to the right. Yep. So the phase shift here is simply 1 unit to the right. What is B?
X over.
B is
Pi
negative
over
pi over
negative
2. Yep, B is negative pi over 2. If that stresses you out a little bit and you're not really happy about the way that looks and setting it all up, then distribute that back through. Y equals 3 sine of negative pi over 2x plus pi over 2, right? If we distribute this through this parentheses, we get this. So what's B? B is negative pi over 2. What's C? Pi over 2. And so what would the phase shift be here? It would be negative pi over 2 over negative pi over 2, right? Negative C over B, which would give us 1, which we knew from that anyway. So either way works, whatever you feel more comfortable with. But it can be nice if they distribute out, if they factor out this term, then that's going to be your phase shift right there.
Wouldn't the phase shift go left in that?
In this? No, because it would be negative C over B. And so this is a plus, but because there's a negative here, that kind of shifts it back the other way. That's right. Okay? How do you what?
Like what mastermind made up this formula?
That was me. Over spring break.
I used to, but like, how would you like actually figure out your first? How do you have the first step in this?
Well, if you start with y equals sine of x, then you just play with it. I mean, weren't some of you guys, the day before spring break when we started doing this stuff, weren't you playing with some of it on your calculator? Some people were. Who was playing with some of the curves on your calculator? Right. And what'd you do to adjust, to change them? You added stuff and multiplied stuff, right? And that's
Change the mode.
kind of how they do it. You know, they look at it and they go, well, what if I didn't want it here? What if I wanted to go higher? What do I do to make it higher? That's what they do. Just play with it. So let's have fun.
Oh boy. There's always the leading.
Let's graph number 62.
62.
62. No.
Take a
By
nap
hand.
first.
Any idea what this is?
Is that the interval?
Is that the right?
What do you mean by interval?
The period,
Period?
the
We don't know if it's period.
amplitude.
Well,
Oh,
Domain.
okay.
Domain. This is the domain. So basically, we want to graph this from where x is negative 3 pi over 2 to where x is positive 3 pi over 2. Okay? This will be the last thing we worry about. Okay? So don't stress about this domain part right now. Let's deal with the rest of it, which looks like a big mess anyway, right? We certainly have enough trouble with that, so we'll worry about the domain at the end. So, here's how you deal with something big and nasty like that. You take it one step at a time and do all the things that you know usually. So what is step one? Okay, it's a sine graph. So, what does that mean if it's a sine graph?
Starts at zero.
Let's start at 0. Okay? Let's get, and let's wait to graph it for a minute. Let's get the information first. So it is a sine graph. What else do we know? The amplitude. What is the amplitude? What's the amplitude?
2/3.
2/3 is correct. It's the number that's in front of the sign. Nothing more difficult than that. What else do we know? What do we keep asking about all the time? We talk about amplitude, we talk about period. Let's find period. Don't. I know you look at that and you get intimidated. And you go, period, oh, I don't want to do period. Let's do something else. Don't do it that way. You know you're going to have to find period. Go on and get it. You know how to find it. How do we find period?
2 pi over
2 pi over b. So 2 pi over
2.
2, which
Pi.
is, well, that wasn't that bad. Okay, got that. What's next? Phase shift. Tell me about the phase shift.
Pi
So
over
it's
2?
negative c over b.
Pi
So
over 2.
it's
Pi over 2.
Negative.
positive pi over b, which is 2. So there's your phase shift, pi over 2. Which direction is this going to go, by the way?
Right.
Right. If phase shift is positive, it goes to the right. If phase shift is negative, it goes to the left. Anything else? Vertical shift. Is there a vertical shift here?
The
1/3.
The vertical shift is 1/3. Over here, the plus d was at the end. Can they take that plus d and put it in the beginning?
Yeah.
Why not? So that's all they did. They took the 2/3 and instead of putting it at the end, they put it at the beginning. Will that vertical shift go up or down? Since it's vertical, I figured those are the only two options. So 1/3 of a unit up. Okay, so we're ready to rock. Here's the good news. The good news is that you know what the sine graph looks like already. Okay? Don't overstress, or don't stress yourself over what it is. Let's say that we're going to go to here. What would okay, let's not worry about this right now. Let's go back and now talk about the sine graph. A normal, everyday sine graph. Where will the end of it be?
Pi. Oh,
2
3
pi. A normal, everyday sine graph will go to 2 pi. which would make this point pi, which would make this point pi over 2. And then remember what we talked about before break. That's pi over 2. That's 2 pi over 2, which would make this 3 pi over 2, which would make this 4 pi over 2, which is just 2 pi. In a normal everyday sine graph, how high will we go? 1. How low will we go? -1. And what's going to happen in a normal everyday sine graph? We'll start at 0. We'll go to 1, right here at pi over 2. Then we'll go to 0. Then we'll go to -1. Then we'll go to 0. And so we get something like this, which is 1 period of our normal everyday sine graph. Okay? We're not answering this question yet, but we're going to. But you want to draw that.
Oh.
You do want to draw that. I'm sorry. I wasn't drawing it like that to just say, here it is, it's pretty, now let's go do something else. No, we're going to use this, and here's why. Okay? The easiest way to get this graph of what we're looking for is to just make adjustments to this. So for instance, the amplitude is 2/3. Okay? I can take care of that.
Dang, I already panned too.
Sorry. With me? All right, what's the next thing we should deal with? Period. We want a period of pi. So what should we do? Change this to pi. Which would mean we're changing this to pi over 2, which would mean we're changing this to pi over 4, because that's half of pi over 2. And then remember, pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, right? Do it that way, it'll make it easier. Pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. And then to confirm that you're right, what would this be?
4
pi over 4, which, does it work?
Yep.
Cool. We've taken care of period. Amplitude check, period check. Now let's talk about phase shift. What does that mean? What does phase shift mean?
The whole graph.
We're just going to take the whole graph and move it to the right by pi over 2. Now pi over 2 is basically 2 tick marks to the right. So we're going to take this original point, we're going to move it over to here. 2 tick marks over.